trauma did not exist until the 2000s. Let's talk about it. 90s kids were raised by baby boomers, which is known as the wholesome generation. The 90s childhood was very innocent and carefree. The pieces of media that 90s kids consumed were silly, straightforward, and educational. Things like Eureka's Castle, Angry Beavers, Dexter's Lab, and Kablam. You can conceptualize the mind of the 90s kid as resembling the landscape of the Nintendo 64 games that they grew up on. Bright colors, simple shapes, little visual information or detail. And then a thing happened, and the world changed. Around this time, Generation Z came into being. They were raised by Generation X, a generation that considered itself to be cynical, but could not truly be so because they were raised in the pre-internet monoculture. Generation Z grew up with media of unprecedented complexity and depth. Suddenly, cartoons like Gravity Falls and Steven Universe, featuring homogeneous, expressive blobs, were communicating with a nuance that nobody had ever seen before. This, combined with the most challenging childhoods in history, created a traumatized generation burdened with mental illness. The Gen Z mind is similar to the endless world of a modern game like Breath of the Wild, characterized by its breadth and richness of detail. I would like to spotlight some insight by TikTok creator Ambi Icarus.
Look at the way that Gen Z reacted to early pandemic marketing versus the way Gen X and millennials reacted to early pandemic marketing. Gen Z read a lot of that early messaging, like, things will get better, we're all in this together, stand with the front lines, as incredibly fucking disingenuous. Meanwhile, I was watching the millennials and Gen Xers I know react positively toward this marketing. They read it as genuine, we're all human beings struggling in this together. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing other than maybe a commentary on Gen Z's collective mental health. And I think this has everything to do with the way that Gen Z has been raised and the culture we've grown up in, the amount of stress that has been placed on this generation. They tend to read things as disingenuous.
I think that this accounts for the generation gap. Millennials have a difficult time relating and communicating with Gen Z because they think in such simple terms. Their brains were not forced to develop and mature in response to trauma. But it's not all bad for Gen Z. These same challenges that they face also open them up to new ways of thinking, and thousands of many cool new identities, genders, and sexualities which are changing the internet and, to a lesser extent, the world.